Have you ever been to a state fair, or I guess maybe even the mall, and they have those gigantic soft pretzels that are so incredibly delicious? We're going to make those today, and we're going to make them out of stuff that you've probably got in your kitchen. Nothing really special, but how we combine the ingredients. That's what makes those soft pretzels so incredible. We're going to do that here. So come on, join me.
In this example, what we're going to do is I'm going to use milk for my liquid. You can also use water. You can use beer if you wish, but we're just using a liquid. And that liquid will have to be somewhere around 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43.3 degrees Celsius, because yeast loves warmth, not hot. You can kill your yeast if you put the liquid in that's way too hot. So you can see here what I'm doing is I'm putting in the milk, and I'm going to put it in this little pot, the saucepan, and I'm going to heat it up, about 1.5 to 1.7 cups of milk. I like a little bit of extra milk just because I really hate fighting the dough when it's really, really hard. And I'm going to use this kitchen thermometer to make sure that I don't want to scorch the milk, certainly, but I want the milk to be 110 degrees is perfect, 110. So I'm going to put it on the stove. You know, this is not rocket science. And a lot of people will just test this with their finger, put their finger in, and when it feels warm, really warm to the touch, they'll think that's good enough. And it probably is. Just remember, the yeast is a living creature, and you don't want to kill it. You don't want to burn it. At 110 degrees, I take it off the stove, and we're going to wake up the yeast now. So grab a large mixing bowl. This is where you're going to at least put in 4.5 cups of flour and the wet things. So you're going to want something made out of plastic or stainless steel, because if you have aluminum, your pretzels can take on a metallic taste. So stainless steel if you got it, plastic if you don't. So now the milk is nice and warm. I'm going to put in my sugar because I'm going to put the yeast in here in a second. So 2 tablespoons of sugar. I mix it half and half, brown sugar and pure white sugar, just because that's what I have. And my wife really likes brown sugar. A lot of people say that they can taste the difference and that the brown sugar has a richer taste that they like in the pretzels. I've tried it both ways. I really can't tell, so it doesn't really matter to me. And I throw in a little bit of salt here, maybe 2 teaspoons. Not a whole lot. This is going to make 8 huge pretzels, so 2 teaspoons of salt is nothing. But we're mixing this all together, and then we're going to put sprinkle the yeast on top. So it's a nice temperature. There's something for the yeast to eat because they're going to love the sugar once you dump it in. And I just dump this right on top and just spread it out as best I can. And since it's warm and it's wet and there's sugar, the 2¼ teaspoons of yeast is just going to come right awake and ferment. But this is what's going to make our dough rise. And I'm going to put this aside and give it about 10 or 15 minutes or longer for the yeast to wake up and to really become active. Okay, now we're going to look at the flour, and you can use all-purpose flour if you wish, or you can use bread flour. Bread flour makes a little softer pretzel on the outside, and it's consequently also softer on the inside. We're going to use 4.5 cups of flour, which is 563 grams, I believe. Not big on the metric system, being an American. But one thing I want to point out is we've just gone through all this effort to make sure that our milk is 110 degrees. If your flour is room temperature and your room is, 65 degrees, you're going to shock and maybe even stunt the growth of your yeast. So you're going to want your flour to be warm as well, room temperature. I like to, when I know I'm going to be making pretzels, I'll put my flour often in my oven because the pilot light will warm it up, and then it'll be, 75, 80 degrees, and that's fine. Here we are just wrapping up with the last of 4.5. Now we're going to mix the wet and the dry ingredients. This has been sitting for 10, 15 minutes, and there's this kind of like a slick or a skin or something on top of it. You can see that it's really thick on top, and that's really a wonderful thing. That means the yeast is doing its job. I'm going to pour in a 1/4 stick of melted butter here. You can put in a little bit more if you wish, just somewhere in that area. Gonna make sure everything's nice and mixed in. Now this trick I'm going to show you, or at least a tip, if not a trick, is this. If you, and you are certainly welcome to take all 4.5 cups of flour and dump in at the same time and start mixing if you wish. And if you have one of those big industrial mixers in your kitchen, maybe that works for you. But I would like to put in just about a cup, maybe a little bit more of flour, and get that all mixed in. And I'm going to do that again with the second cup. And then maybe even the third cup, because I want it mixed as good as possible. Because this ends up being a really dry dough towards the end, and really hard to handle if you just start out from the beginning dumping all the flour in. So a little bit at a time is a good way to do this. Now the time is going to come in just 4 or 5 minutes or thereabouts. At some point when you can't use the spoon, you're just going to have to clean off the spoon and get your fingers in there. The last bit's going to be done with your hands. Make sure your hands are clean, of course. I didn't need to tell you that. But with clean hands, just you can dump in the rest of the flour and go to town. Just mix it in. I like grabbing it and poking my fingers through it and just really doing it like that till it's kind of sticky. But once it starts pulling away from the bowl like this and not so much stuck to the bowl anymore, then I'm going to pull it out, lay it on a floured surface, which is in this case my kitchen table, which is a wonderful work surface, and I've already floured it, and then put everything on it and just start kneading. And it's going to be 5 minutes, maybe even longer, until suddenly at some point you will feel the dough change. And the only thing I can tell you is it goes from being stiff and rugged and uncooperative to suddenly being just a big, not fluffy ball, but a real big pliable wad of dough. And it's great. And what I do here is, you can see I'm pushing my hands through it. I'm really pushing that into the surface of the table. You really do have to work this dough. You can't just kind of slap it around or act like you're kneading it. You've really got to push through it. Put a lot of power and energy into it, and that really starts lining up the internal ingredients and helping the chemistry work and the structure and the physics and all of it working together. So at some point, this hard, barely malleable wad of dough will just suddenly relax. You'll kind of feel it relax, and then you can move it around. And as soon as that happens, then you've got a nice ball, and it's easy to work with. Now that I've got my dough kneaded, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour in a little bit of olive oil in this bowl. And I'm just going to, and this is really an important step, I'm going to coat the inside of the bowl, and then I'm going to coat the ball of dough with olive oil as well. Now cover this, and I'm going to put it in a really warm place, which in my case is my oven. And this ball of dough is going to double and maybe even triple in size over the next 40 minutes to an hour. I'm going to let this rise. And my wife handles this plastic wrap so well, and it never does anything but give me grief. You don't want it drying out. So after wrestling with, I don't know, 5 or 6 sheets of this cling wrap that I was trying to get on the bowl, and I just could, either the bowl was too big or hey, you tell me. I just couldn't get it. So what I'm going to do here in a second is I'm going to just put this away, and I'm going to go get a dish towel and get it damp and put across the top of everything. And that works just fine. You don't even need the plastic wrap. Okay, that's just about as good as I get with the plastic wrap. And I know in my heart that it's inadequate. So I'm going to get a dish towel. I'm going to get it damp, and I'm going to cover this anyway because I want to keep this dough from drying out. I'm putting it in a warm area, which is in my oven, and there's a pilot light in there, and so it's warm. The rest of my house has air conditioning and a fan. So here I am pulling the dough out of the oven that's been in there rising for about an hour. You can see it's 2.5, 3 times bigger than it was when I put it in. Great. So I'm gonna throw it on a floured surface. Here's this great work table that I have in my little bitty kitchen. And I'm gonna make a log. Now, ideally, I'm just gonna cut this into 8 equal pieces to make 8 great sized pretzels. Each piece should be about the size of a tennis ball or a little bit smaller. I unfortunately cut this one a little too small, but it serves for, illustrating how to do this. I'm going to roll it out. You kind of want a rope about 3/4 of an inch thick. Maybe you can do a little bit less, a little bit more, but you want it about 30 inches long. That's what I'm going for. And as I rub it back and forth, as I kind of need this, you can see I'm pulling, as I pull it towards me, I put some backwards and outwards pressure on it, and that's what stretches this rope out. So do that. And when you get anywhere around 30 inches, 28 is fine, 32 is fine, depends on how much dough you've got. You'll just have to develop a feel for that. But about 3/4 of an inch thick and about 30 inches long would be ideal. Now I'm going to make a U here, or a horseshoe, depending on which vantage point you're using. And I'm going to throw the legs over each other once and twice and maybe 3 times. Here we go, doing it now. I'm going to throw the leg over each other, 1, 2, and I think I go 3 times. Yeah, I do. And then just flip that whole knot onto the inside of the pretzel and pinch down the legs there so they'll stick. Now, they don't always stick because at this point it's a little dry. So you put some water in there and just dab it in there and then pinch it, and it'll stay right. Now you want to make sure that those 3 chambers are opened up, what have you. They traditionally represent the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, but that's the traditional pretzel shape there. And speaking of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, if you go to my personal website, geargnome.com, you can there find a link to a free Book of Mormon. Or if you prefer, you can also get a free Holy Bible by following one of the links there. I encourage you to do both, actually. Why not? I don't want to get the metallic taste from the pan. So you can use parchment paper or a silicone mat, whatever you have. But since we're going to be putting these in baking soda water in just a minute, that will cause a chemical reaction that will change the taste of the pretzels. So we don't want to do that. Now I've got the water starting to boil. It's the 9 cups of water for 1.5 cups of baking soda. I've only got 4 cups in there because I'm only going to put in 1/2 cup. I mean, I've only got the 2 pretzels. I'm also going to do an egg wash here. I'm going to take out the yolk and throw away the whites, add some water in it, and I'm just going to use 1 egg because, like I said, I've only got these 2 pretzels. The other 6 pretzels out of this pack are going for a party tomorrow night where family's coming over. We're going to play some bluegrass, and they all want to make their own pretzels. So I'm just doing 2 then tonight to show you how. You're also going to need some kosher salt that we're going to sprinkle on top of the pretzel before we put it in the oven, after we do the egg wash, and then we're going to do the salt. So this is just the yolk with just a couple of tablespoons of water. You can put some salt in here if you wish. I like to wait until afterwards so that you can actually see it on the pretzel, which makes it, more visually appealing. The super secret is the baking soda bath. Now, preheat your oven to 450. That's Fahrenheit. Here we go. We're putting in the baking soda into the boiling water. Do not skip this step. This is what makes a pretzel instead of just a piece of bread. So here we are. We've got the 2 pretzels. These are just dough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick them up, and I'm going to drop them one at a time because this is a small pan, you can see. And I'm going to drop them in there. Now, you'll be surprised on how much bigger they are when they come out, how swollen they are. These only need to be in the bath for about 30 seconds if you keep them submerged. If you let them float, then maybe 25 seconds, 30 seconds each side. But I wouldn't go any longer than a minute, and I wouldn't go any less than 30 seconds. So, just eyeball it, and once they start getting big and fluffy, you're kind of done. I'm using this wire basket here to submerge it, and I think I'm going to flip it because it was so fluffy that the top was sticking out of the water. So I wanted to make sure that I got 30 seconds, a good 30 seconds on each side then. So flipped it, let it go for about 30 seconds, and then scoop it out and put it back on the parchment paper. Look how much that has swelled up or swollen up. Do the same thing with the next one. Through the magic of editing, it's been about 30 seconds or so, maybe just a couple seconds longer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull this out and put it on the cookie sheet along with this little friend. And again, observe how much it has swollen up. You want to see this happen. It was a skinny little pretzel before, and now look at it, it's gigantic. Okay, and we're going to take these back to the table, put the egg wash on them, and sprinkle them with kosher salt, or coarse salt, any coarse salt. You can see the one on the right has swollen up so much that the holes kind of disappeared. So I'm going to move them around a little bit just so that they look like a pretzel. They're homemade. So I'm going to take a little bit of the egg wash, and I'm just going to paint these with a little bit of egg wash, getting ready to go into the oven. You don't have to overdo it. It doesn't take a whole lot. I'm going to do the same with the other one. Put some egg wash on it. That gives it a really nice golden brown top. You don't want to overdo it with your pretzels. 12 to 14 minutes is what the recipe says. I like to do it more towards the 12-minute side in the oven because it doesn't take too much extra time to be too much extra time. So now they've been egg washed, I'm going to take some of this coarse salt and just sprinkle it about on top of it. I'll do this again afterwards. After I put the butter on, I'll throw a few more sprinkles of salt on top just so that, you know, it's well salted, not over salted. You'll get it. Since the salt is coarse, you can see when you've got too much on there. And into the oven they go. Again, your oven's going to be at 450, and I like baking the pretzels at more closer to 12 minutes than 14 minutes. All right, it's been about 14 minutes. Let's get them out of the oven and see what we've got. Very nice. They look great. I'm pleased with this. You can see they're just about the size of my hand. They've come down a little bit once you start baking them. Some of the water escapes. I melted some butter for a final wash. I'm going to slap that on. It's hard to get too much butter at this point when they're hot and they're yummy. It just soaks the butter up. So I think I did a quarter stick of butter. I'm not quite sure. But that's quite a bit for 2 pretzels. What do you think? What do you think? I think they're beautiful. Now at this point, I've just put the fresh butter on. I'm about to take them out to share with my sweetheart. So I'm going to just put on a little more salt. And that salt is just really for looks at this point because I've got some salt from before I could see it on there. And you can always rub off extra salt if you want. Some people like a lot of salt on their pretzels. Cupcake and I really like pretzels and mustard. So there you go. I hope you had as much fun doing this as I did. Thanks a lot. Also, the recipe for this giant bagel is going to be on my site, geargnome.com. And if you, that's also free. And if you want free bluegrass lyrics and chord charts, well, guess what's on my site, geargnome.com. And now, if you want to buy something, I've been designing funny t-shirts, and you can get those also as stickers or mugs. And those links will be at geargnome.com.